And thank you for joining us. My name is Mary, and I will be the host for today's webinar. Before we dive into the content, let me cover a few housekeeping items. So first, at the bottom of your screen are multiple application engagement tools that you can use. All those engagement tools are resizable and movable, so feel free to move them around to get the most out of your desktop space. You can also expand your presentation area or maximize it to full screen by clicking on the arrows in the top right corner. If you have any audio or video issue, you can find answers to some common technical issues located in the Help widget at the bottom of your screen. Please note that a copy of today's slide deck and additional resources are available in the resource list. Please have a look and download everything that you may find useful. On top of this, the webinar will be recorded and sent via the email you registered with. Lastly, if you have any questions during the presentation, you can submit them through the Q&A widget. We're here to answer you live via the chat throughout the presentation, so don't hesitate to reach out. In case we run out of time or we don't manage to answer you, we'll make sure to follow up later by email. Now, allow me to introduce you to our speakers. So today, the webinar will be co-hosted by 3 medical devices subject matter experts from Jama Software, MDM Engineering Consulting, and BeanStock Ventures. First, we will have Mercedes Massana, who offers more than 35 years of management and technical expertise in the medical device industry. With a unique skill set that combines expertise in quality management in regulated industries and skills in risk management, system engineering, and software development validation, Mercedes is able to help her clients reach the right balance in developing compliant solutions for commercializing medical devices on time, and also by exceeding quality expectations and within budget. Then we'll have also Stephen Meadows, Principal Solutions Lead at Jama Software, who works solely with our medical and life science customers. Prior to Jama, Stephen worked for an Atlassian partner, and after becoming certified, helped agile software teams get up and running with Jira, Confluence, and a number of other applications. With almost 10 years of experience in software implementation and solution architecture, he's passionate about helping companies transform for the better. And finally, we will also have Shona Monterrey. With 20 plus years experience in the medical industry, Shona knows a thing or two about getting innovative products to market. Prior to founding BeanStock Ventures, she has been holding product development management position across numerous global firms, including Illumina, Inventec, Medtronic, and Carl Zeiss Meditech. After this quick introduction, let me go through today's agenda. So we will start the presentation with an introduction to digital health with Mercedes, who will review the categories, the software's medical device, situations and classification, the broad development challenges, and some applicable standards. Then we'll have Stephen, who will share with you what challenges our medical customers are facing and how Jama Connect can help. And finally, we'll have Shona Monterrey from BeanStock Ventures, who will be answering some commonly asked questions around digital health. And from there, I will hand it over to you, Mercedes.
Thank you, Marie. All right, so digital health. Digital health merges different digital technologies to make health and healthcare applicable to our living in society and make it more personalized for the patient. Many people see digital health as the future of healthcare. So some things that are digital health are like wearable devices. For example, your Apple Watch, right? It has some sensors that can do an EKG. That would be considered a wearable device. Things like telehealth and telemedicine, which we all became more familiar with because of COVID, are also part of digital health. For digital health, you use technologies such as different computing platforms, connectivity, which is very important because you're trying to get information to the healthcare provider. Software plays a huge and significant role in digital health, and then different technology with sensors. So these technologies are intended to be used as a medical product or as a companion diagnostic to a medical product, and help the healthcare provider make decisions. So software is playing an increasingly important role in healthcare in general. As medical devices have gone more complex, software has played a bigger role. There are three different types of software related to medical device. One is software in a medical device, embedded in a medical device. Another is software as a medical device, which we'll call SAMD, and we'll be discussing today. And the third is software used to produce or maintain a medical device. All these three types of software are regulated by the different regulatory agencies. So software as a medical device is software that is intended to be used for one or more medical purposes that perform these purposes without being embedded in a medical device. So when we say embedded in a medical device, is software that's physically part of a medical device. Like an infusion pump has embedded software in it that runs the GUI on the infusion pump. So this means that this software that's a medical device in itself is not something that's tangible. It's not something that you can touch, like a medical device, right? You can touch. Well, this software lives in the ether, and it's not something you can touch, but it provides meaningful information that can help you mitigate disease. It can help you diagnose screening. Like, for example, if you had software that took information from an MRI and helped define whether cancer was present, that would be software as a medical device. It takes information from another device and it helps a healthcare provider make a diagnosis. So for software as a medical device, an important part is to determine what that intended use is. And in order to do that, guidance documents you have to provide the answers to these three very direct questions. So one is, what is the significance of the information provided by SAMD to the healthcare decision? So is this information going to be used to help treat a disease, to help diagnose a disease, to help clinical management of the disease like diabetes, or to just inform clinical management? So obviously it's more critical if it's going to treat or diagnose a disease. We also want to know the healthcare situation or condition, right? The scenario in which the software is going to be used, and whether absence or incorrect information at that time can result in putting somebody in a critical position, right, where they might be subjected to serious injury, or in a serious position where they might be subjected to additional procedures and things that would not be necessary, or in a non-serious position where it's just information is not really that critical. And then we also want to know what is the core functionality of the software. What is it supposed to do? What are its critical features and functions? So based on these three questions, we would craft an intended use statement for the software as a medical device. So the healthcare situation, there's three different classifications, as we said. So critical is where accurate or timely diagnosis or treatment action is vital to avoid death or serious injury. Serious is where we need accurate and timely information in order to avoid an unnecessary intervention. And then non-serious is where, the information is important, but it's not critical, right, in order to avoid death, serious injury, or unnecessary intervention. So once we've determined what that healthcare situation or condition is, then we can determine the significance of the software. So we use the categorization categories provided by IMDRF, which is the International Medical Device Regulators Forum. So this organization has actually generated some guidance for SAMD, and it's used by regulators to try to have some common level of standards on how this software is going to be regulated. So in order to get to the classification, we determine the healthcare condition, right? What's that healthcare scenario? And then we determine what the software, what that information provided is going to be used for. So if it's going to be used to treat or diagnose disease and it's in a critical scenario, that will have the highest level of criticality, which is a 4. There's 4 levels of classification, 1 being the least critical. right? So again, it's a level of 1 to 4. 1 has a very high impact, and 4 has a very high impact, and 1 a low impact. So a device that would screen, right, for cancer, or something that software would be used to screen for cancer would be very high impact. Something where maybe we're sending our heart rate for somebody who's going through cardiac rehabilitation, that might be a lower impact, right? Because it's just using to inform the clinician on how things are going, but it's not being used directly to impact on the treatment. There are additional ways to classify medical devices. So the Global Harmonization Task Force has a classification of A, B, C, or D. So 4-stage classification where A is the lowest level of risk and D is the highest level of risk. These can be used because SAMD is in itself a medical device. We can use this level too. Additionally, IEC 62304 classifies software in 3 different classes, C, B, or A, where C is if the software fails, it can result in serious injury or death. B, it can result in non-serious injury, and A would result in no injury or harm. Now, why is it important to classify software? Because this will tell us how much effort we need to put into the documentation and testing and so forth of software. Obviously, the more critical it is, the more effort it will be required. FDA also classifies software. They have a level of concern for software, and there's 3 levels also, which align pretty well with the definition of IEC 62304. For FDA, they use major, moderate, and minor. So software as a medical device, software in general has always been challenging for manufacturing. Software as a medical device poses some additional challenges to the developer of the software. So some of these are, for example, the use of off-the-shelf software is a lot more prevalent in SAMD than it is with embedded devices. Regulatory agencies want to see a lot of information when you're using off-the-shelf software or SOUP, which is software of unknown provenance. So there's a lot of requirements that you need to meet. This is essentially software that you don't own, you don't have the source code for, but it's still used in your medical device. So you're still responsible to ensure that it's safe within the parameters that you're using it. Software as a medical device also, it will run on different platforms, right? It can run on a computer, it can run on an iPad, it can run on a smartphone, as opposed to embedded software where you know the environment that it will always operate in. So it is a challenge to ensure that software behaves effectively in any of the platforms that it will run in. Interconnectivity is a big challenge. Even though most medical devices today have some form of interconnection, right, to other systems, for SAMD, it's almost a given that it will have to be interconnected because the information will have to get to the healthcare provider, and that is typically through the internet, right? It's going to be sent there. So there will be connectivity to other systems that will provide challenges like cybersecurity, right? We need to keep information safe. So those are challenges that we need to meet. Secondly, the method of distribution, the frequency of updates of SAMD is different than that of an embedded medical device. So for an embedded medical device, the device gets built, right? The software gets put in EEPROMs, it gets built into the device gets packaged, it gets sent out to a pharmacy where you might buy it, or it gets sent out to a hospital where it will be unpacked and tested. Well, software as a medical device is not a tangible thing, so it's going to be distributed through the internet. And there is no checks and balances there, right? There's no checksum to know that you downloaded it correctly. So it proves some additional challenges there. And then lastly here, it's much easier to duplicate software that's on the internet, right, that you can download. the manufacturer doesn't always have control of how this software is duplicated, as opposed to software for an embedded medical device where in the manufacturing facility, it gets burned into EEPROMs and then gets put into the medical device. So the manufacturer has control. For SAMD, the manufacturer does not have control, or does not always have control. Other challenges. Okay. Other challenges include rapid development time. So for most applications, right, the apps we have on our smartphones, they get updated probably 3, 4, 5, 6 times a year. So for a medical device software, those are you need to have a pretty rapid development time in order to keep up with this change of information. Then there's also cybersecurity risks that we need to be aware of. Again, information security is a big issue. SAMD is something that regulatory agencies are very interested in. So how do we get to meet these development challenges? Well, we need to have a very robust design development process to help us meet these challenges. So we need a process that's very methodical and systematic. We need a good quality management system. And then we need a software lifecycle process that takes us through the entire software lifecycle for development of this application. It should take us from the point of where we're starting to understand user needs all the way to where we're ready to retire the software. So IEC 62304 is such a process where most medical device people that are developing medical device software are utilizing this process. In addition, because the environment that the software is used in can change after release of the software, it is important to have a very strong post-market surveillance process to monitor customer issues in the field. You also need to monitor for cybersecurity threats, things like that, and you might need to make changes to your software based on what you're observing in the field. So a post-market surveillance process is very important. Additionally, managing software changes, which is always important no matter what the software is used for, whether it's a software as a medical device or embedded software in a medical device, is very important to manage changes. But for software as a medical device is even more important because what you change in the software could actually change the classification of the software, right? It could be more critical or less critical, and it can also change the intended use. If you change the intended use, that means that you're going to have to submit to regulatory agencies, right? So you won't, before you get approval to market that software. There are a lot of software applications now, software as medical devices, where they're getting so much data and information that they're using artificial intelligence or machine learning to make the software smarter and better. Using this could potentially change the classification of the software. SAMD is still fairly new to regulatory agencies, so I don't think they've figured out exactly how they're going to regulate things like artificial intelligence and machine language, but again, managing changes and understanding the impact of those changes is very important for our software as a medical device. So there aren't a lot of guidance documents out there for software as a medical device, but luckily there are a few standards that can guide us in our development efforts. So we talked about having a very robust quality management system. So quality management system that complies with ISO 13485 or with the FDA design control requirements in 21 CFR 820.30 establishes that you have all the right processes to be able to manage software throughout its life cycle. IEC 82304-1, which was released in 2016, addresses healthcare software and specifically the safety and security of this software. IEC 82304 relies on IEC 62304 for the software lifecycle portion. It also references IEC 62336 for usability. It references TR 80001 for security. It calls out ISO 14971, even though there's an asterisk there because it's not required, but it's recommended in order to address safety. And then there are FDA cybersecurity guidance documents that can be used to address cybersecurity. And lastly, IEC 82304, which not everybody's familiar with. This is kind of a graphical representation of what is covered. As you can see on the bottom there, all of that is the IEC 62304 lifecycle process. But in front of this, I like to say that they put a systems engineering front end here because software as a medical device is a system in itself. So it's a medical device in itself. You need to establish the user needs that you're going to try to satisfy with the software so that you can validate that you've satisfied those needs. Then those user needs need to be decomposed into system requirements that will be verified, right? And that's how you verify that the software behaves as it should. Then we point to 62304 for the entire lifecycle process, which would include doing risk management. It includes a maintenance phase. It includes requirements on how you will handle OTS software or SOUP. So big reliance on 62304. Also in the maintenance phase, as we talked about, changes. How do we determine changes? How do we maintain configuration management and releasing the software? So all of that is covered in 62304. But as a system, we have the user needs, we validate, and then we do post-market surveillance. So this is all part of 82304, which covers the entirety of the software healthcare. And now I'd like to hand it over to Steve, who will tell us how Jama can help us in this endeavor.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mercedes, for that great introduction and background on digital health. So as Marie mentioned earlier, I'm the Principal Solutions Lead here at Jama Software that works solely with our medical and life science customers. I have a pretty software-heavy background, and I've held various implementation and development functions during my career. So this is a particularly exciting topic for me. And I'd like to begin with talking about the different teams that Jama Software can help in terms of their digital health solution development. So we work with a number of customers coming from different backgrounds with various levels of process, tool, and regulatory maturities. We help teams that are transitioning from non-regulated digital health development to regulated with a change in their tool or system classification or function. We also help teams using document-centric tools throughout their development process. They may be using tools like Microsoft Word, Excel, Confluence, SharePoint, and other similar applications. A lot of our customers creating digital health solutions might also be using a task tracking tool built with software teams in mind. Some that come to mind are Jira or Azure DevOps, and their development ecosystems also typically include document-centric tools that I just mentioned previously. And finally, we work with customers who may be using a legacy system that really is more of a burden than a help. So the teams that I just described all face challenges with their approach to digital health development, and I'd now like to highlight what our customers tell us are their biggest hurdles, and the focus is really going to be around systems design development challenges. So one of the biggest challenges that we hear from a lot of our customers we initially talk to about their digital health development is that they don't really have any visibility or ability to collaborate across different development teams. So this means it's hard to understand the status of different teams like marketing, product, software, quality, and other teams throughout the process. And newly regulated teams often underestimate the importance of having these teams centralized in a solution where visibility and collaboration are both core. Teams using disparate systems and tools like Word, Excel, Confluence don't have actionable data, or their collaborative capabilities really aren't effective for a systems development process. Now, when it comes to creating documentation for your design history file or just relevant project documentation, teams often don't have tools in place that make the process easy and as painless as possible. So different teams piecemeal documentation at the end of development typically without a systematic approach or reusable quality templates. Another pain point we hear is understanding the release scope of a system or multiple systems. It's difficult to understand differences between releases, document changes to a particular version, and see what versions of a system may be impacted by a change to a particular requirement, for example. A lot of software teams use an agile methodology when creating their systems, and they oftentimes they don't like the idea of layering in another tool that creates additional effort. They know they have gaps in their overall process, but don't want to slow their development cycles, understandably. Change management is another critical challenge when dealing with digital health solutions. When using disparate solutions and document-centric processes, it's risky and cumbersome analyzing potential impacts of change before making a change. It becomes even more difficult to understand and involve the right stakeholders at the right time when making a particular change as well. And lastly, one of the other challenges that we hear frequently from our customers is reviewing project documentation, requirements, risk tests, and other development artifacts often becomes a reactive process at the end of development. So defects and omissions are spotted late, causing system recalls, delays with release to market, and other issues too. Also, waiting for documents to be finalized before being reviewed can stop agile teams from iterating quickly. So now I want to dig into the scope of Jama Connect and see how it can help with the challenges that I just spoke about. So where does Jama Connect fit into the grand scheme of things when it comes to digital health development? So at a high level, Jama Connect for digital health development is a software solution for teams really to manage their design controls for device requirements, tests and related risks, ultimately simplifying regulatory submissions and audit preparations, while at the same time accelerating time to market. It really helps customers adhere to various standards that Mercedes was just talking about previously, including 21 CFR A2030, your design controls, ISO 13485, your overall QMS, IEC 62304, software processes and lifecycle, ISO 14971, hazard analyses, as well as many other standards. So let's dive into some of the features that our digital health customers take advantage of to help alleviate some of the challenges that I just mentioned in the previous slides. So as I mentioned before, visibility across development can have a huge impact on your released digital health products. Without understanding what's going on and getting the big picture, potential gaps in development as well as omissions and defects can be missed, putting your patients and your entire system at risk. So Jama Connect offers full visibility across all development activities. Digital health development isn't just about software teams. Marketing, product, software quality, like I mentioned before, and other teams need to stay up to date in real time. Jama Connect allows digital health design controls to be fully implemented in one centralized tool, allowing all of those stakeholders involved with the process to understand progress, connectivity, and ultimately who to collaborate with at different design stages. The full design control process is more than just software epics, for example, or stories tied to a requirement. There are often tiered types of requirements. Mercedes mentioned user needs, for example, and these types of requirements are tied to risks, tests, defects, and changes made throughout the process. So our trace view allows our customers to easily identify how development artifacts are connected to one another, where there are potentially gaps throughout the process, what hasn't been tested yet, and where there may be risks not tied to mitigating downstream requirements. This real-time information isn't something you can get in outdated documents, Confluence pages, emails, or other legacy systems. So Jama also offers dashboard functionality to help different teams get a real-time picture of the development status of their solution or version of a system. Here you can see we're getting the up-to-date dev status or development status of JIRA issues, defects, stories, and we're also able to see any requirements with no associated verifications or validations. Our testing capabilities also allow teams to get summary information on the dashboard around test execution status. We can even pull those test results in via the API from automated testing tools. So Jama makes standardizing your documentation and creating your design history file very easy through reporting and different or various export options. With increasing complexity of systems, this mandatory quality task becomes critical and something that you can now proactively manage throughout development. We have a number of out-of-the-box document templates, which can be easily customized to fit any quality team's expectations. Different teams don't have to scramble, to create documentation anymore. With a couple of clicks, they can automatically generate required documents for their design history file, as well as any related project documentation in a predefined format. So this can work seamlessly also across multiple versions of your system, which brings me to the next critical capability of Jama. So understanding release scope and not reinventing the wheel every time you have a new version of your product in the market is a key challenge to overcome. Jama supports different scenarios that can help with your configuration management and versioning of systems. You can quickly build standard libraries, as you can see here within the slide. You can reuse core requirements, risks, tests, and other development artifacts. We also support linear and parallel release management methodologies, allowing your software teams to quickly understand release scope, produce relevant documentation, and push and pull changes across different versions. A critical part of any overall digital health solution team is the developers working on the system itself. So agile methodologies have become the new norm for software development, and it's crucial that layering in another tool won't cause agile teams to slow down in any way. So with Jama Connect, software teams actually have the ability to keep working in the tools that they're used to today. In fact, they don't ever have to leave the application or platform. Two of the most common agile software task tracking tools that we integrate with that a lot of teams are used to working in today are Jira and Azure DevOps. So by integrating with these types of tools, developers have better visibility into the upstream context of the requirements, and stakeholders involved with the high-level requirement definition have much better visibility into downstream development efforts. So gone are the days, of tedious meetings and IMs to fully understand or get a better picture of progress across various teams. With development artifacts spread across different documents and tools, it's often very time-consuming, error-prone to actually identify potential impacts of changes before making any. Jama Connect offers both proactive and reactive approaches to change management. Within the left image, you can see here that the system's automatically flagged a user need as changed, indicating that downstream software requirements should be analyzed for further impacts. On the right-hand side, we're showing an impact analysis produced within the application itself that spans all potential impacts across development. You've got to remember here that with design controls, you aren't just focused on software requirements. There's added complexity across the entire development lifecycle. Review cycles across teams involved with digital health development are often slow, not centralized, as well as inefficient. When dealing with documents, teams often have to wait longer to review and accept requirements for development. So with Jama Connect, you can iteratively send off different patient, product, and software requirements for review in a centralized location, which allows for team members to collaborate and spot issues a lot quicker. You'll see above that we've rejected, or within this image here, that we've rejected one of our software requirements, approved 2 of them, and there's a threaded conversation that's going on which provides further context on why a particular software requirement has changed over time. In Jama's Review Center, moderators and managers can get full visibility into how close to completion a review is. The ability to track this information at a granular level improves visibility across the development, which is a huge benefit for teams. So hopefully by briefly introducing some of our core capabilities, you heard and saw how Jama Connect can create what we call a living requirement thread for your digital health solution, keeping all of the teams connected, up to date, and able to iterate quickly and also in an agile way. So some of the key benefits that I'm going to reiterate now of using Jama Connect include the ability to improve visibility and team collaboration across all development efforts, the ability to manage document and design history file creation and standardization, understanding release scope and ability to reuse development artifacts across multiple versions, allowing agile teams to remain agile in their tool of choice through integrations that we support, assessing impacts of change across all development artifacts, and finally, being able to review more iteratively in a centralized location that different teams can access. So here are a couple of quotes from just two of our many, many different medical customers that are using Jama today. You can read here how Jama has been considered an integral part of Varian's digital agile transformation, and also here how Grifols finds a lot of value in using our review center, ultimately helping to identify and resolve issues a lot quicker. So now I'd like to introduce Shauna Monterey from BeanStock Ventures, who will be answering some commonly asked questions. So let's start here with our first question. So Shauna, how are regulators addressing the challenges with software as a medical device / digital health? And the second part of this question is, and what is the impact to developers of digital health technologies?
Sure. So it's typical that when an organization's ready to launch a medical device, or let's say SAMD, they'll bring in regulators and quality experts from very mature organizations that tend to have a very deep understanding of the regulation, but very rigorous and traditional waterfall-based quality system. But as we heard here, the software teams are very agile, and that's a trend that's going to continue. And they typically don't have such well-versed experience in the quality management system. So when you start merging these two teams, it can create constraints and resistance between those two teams, and it can hinder development and innovation. So from a developer's perspective, understanding the intent of the regulation is very important in creating alignment and collaboration with your quality and regulatory support staff. This will allow a partnership and allow you guys to start creating very creative approaches, which can be defined as relying on more of software tools as opposed to controlled documents.
Excellent. Thank you, Shauna. All right. Next question here. So with the increased role of telemedicine in the age of COVID-19 specifically, is there a greater need and reliance on SAMD and mobile medical platforms?
This one's interesting, right? Because telemedicine in itself may not be regulated from a medical device perspective, but the clinical applications that are hosted on these platforms may very well be. So clinical applications can include remote patient monitoring, but again, it depends on its intended use, as we discussed earlier. So understanding the intended use of your product is key, is determining whether or not your product is a medical device. Once you make that determination that your product is then regulated, you need to understand the safety impacts, and that's key to then understanding the level of design control rigor you need to ensure that your software is safe and effective. So although telemedicine itself may not be regulated, the clinical applications that are hosted by the telemedicine framework may be.
And have you been involved with a lot more telemedicine customers over the last year, Shauna?
No, we're actually seeing a lot more customers in the IOMT space, which will eventually connect up to telemedicine. And so that's the Internet of Medical Things, which include remote monitoring. And so remote patient monitoring is part of telemedicine. So I think that's probably the piece that we expect to grow all across the industry, including therapeutics and pharmaceuticals. So it's quite interesting, and it's emerging quite rapidly.
Great. Okay, next question, Shauna. So what regulatory barriers must software-centric medical device companies overcome in order to get an innovative or creative device to market?
So I may be reiterating a few things Mercedes has mentioned before, but I'll just kind of cover a few. So developing a quality management system, which is appropriate for the size of the company. So again, we've seen very small organizations adopt a very large organization quality management system, and it ends up, it's excessive and it ends up hindering the team. So I think finding that right balance is important. Training the staff, both regulatory and quality, on Agile, and then training the software teams on the regulations so that everyone speaks the same language. That's essential to the success of the organization and the launch of the product. And again, I can't overemphasize understanding the intent of the regulation and how it applies to your product or not. Just because it's in the regulation, it doesn't mean it necessarily needs to apply to your product, right? So really understanding the intent of that is going to be really important to be able to navigate that regulatory landscape. Risk management, cybersecurity, post-market surveillance, and traceability are other items that I'd like to identify as being barriers.
Excellent. Okay. Next questions we have for you, Shauna. So what is the impact of requirements management on the medical device development process for digital health solutions, and how is this different from hardware devices? And the second question here is, what special considerations must development teams make to ensure compliance?
So requirements in general is starting with the user needs, right? And it also includes the regulatory requirements as well. That's the basis of product definition and drives everything downstream, whether it's a software device or a hardware device. The things that are a little bit different from a hardware device perspective is that you have to have system architecture considerations of the instrument which you're going to integrate with. But with that said, as a digital health application, you're still integrating into some sort of ecosystem. So you still need to take that same systems approach and then understand how your clinical application could be influenced in the environment in which it operates. Traceability, of course, is essential in ensuring your product is fully verified and validated. And it can be very complicated and difficult to manage, especially in a fast-changing environment that Agile enables. And so we recommend leveraging tools such as Jama for requirements management, and ultimately the support of development teams in the creation and maintenance of even the design history file. And so we're moving towards leveraging tools as opposed to controlled documents and templates, right? We'd like to see that migration. We'd like to enable that migration, and we think it's possible, but we do think it's very important for the regulatory and quality teams to get trained on Agile and for the software development teams to get trained on the regulation.
And do you find that there are any challenges when you're talking about traceability specifically with software teams, Shauna?
Definitely. I think traceability ends up being done as an artifact or a side effect. And so it kind of misses the key intent of traceability, right? So the reason why you're doing traceability is so that you can ensure that your product's fully verified and validated and that it's safe and effective. Right. And so the problem is when you do it after the fact, it creates somewhat of a burden and actually can impact your product because something got overlooked. Right. And so if you're not doing it up front and regularly, you have a high chance of delaying your launch as a result of doing traceability at the end of the product development cycle. Right. If you're missing a key risk mitigation, you're not going to be able to launch, right, if it impacts safety. So those are things to consider, that it should be done up front and continuously.
Great. Okay, next question for you, Shauna. What impact does the recent exclusion of 8 software functions from the definition of a medical device have on systems development?
So it's basically the exclusion is just reducing FDA oversight, right? So FDA really wants to start supporting higher risk applications so that they can focus on digital health. But to explain it further, software applications that take data from a medical device and transfer the data for like archiving, storage, review purposes, and do not alter such data nor control the devices are not necessarily considered a medical device. And so the switching point is once you start taking that data and manipulate it or even start controlling or configuring the medical device, then you need to evaluate whether your healthcare application is now considered a medical device by the FDA. And we've seen a lot of clients move into that space not knowing that they're actually entering the area of medical device. And some actually do it intentionally because they want to become a medical device from a competitive perspective or adding additional clinical value. But there is that area that we started seeing where devices that were traditionally MDDS, software classified at MDDS, is actually considered now a medical device because it does inform clinical decisions. The good news is the FDA is now moving towards self-certification for products via process certification. So I don't think that guidance is cleared yet, but the intent is that if you can certify your process, then your process can be deemed as repeatable. And if you have a repeatable, controlled process, then you're going to build consistent, reliable, safe products. And that's the idea. Obviously, they wouldn't allow self-certification for high-risk clinical applications or SAMDs, but they have the risk classification defined that you saw earlier that's going to be used as a basis for self-certification. So that's exciting.
Interesting. Huh. Okay, next one we have. What recommendations do you have for teams dealing with regulations for the first time?
my main feedback is like, don't overthink the regulatory compliance. The more intimidated you are, the more rigor and constraints you're actually going to pose on your company, right? You're just going to overthink it, and it doesn't need to be that complicated. And the reason being is because they're derived from best practices, right? So apply your best practices within software engineering. Always look at decisions from a risk-based perspective, right? In terms of what you're going to introduce from a process and control perspective, right? Look at it in terms of risk and benefit. Put a quality management team member on the Scrum team. That's like a new thing I like to recommend. I think it's a really neat, novel idea. And we've seen actually significant improvements in terms of alignment, because now the quality team member is part of the development team. Obviously, bring in compliance experts who actually understand Agile. I think that's important. And then consider solutions aligned to industry and with industry to get you started quickly, such as Jama.
So Shauna, do you see like a big shift when you first consult for your new customers, onboarding customers that are shifting into more of the regulatory space? Do you see a big change in the ways generally how software teams start off working to the way that you end up advising that they ultimately work, or is it really just kind of instilling some small tweaks here and there?
It's much more complicated than that, right? So majority of the customers, if they come in and they're just like an Agile software team and they don't have existing quality or regulatory oversight and they ask for our support, it's more straightforward, right? But if they already have a quality team, as I mentioned, coming in from larger organizations, right, and they're very experienced, they're instilling kind of the old way of doing things, right, which is very structured, very waterfall, very phase gate type of structure. And the Agile teams have a really hard time adapting. The other thing that we're seeing is in the past, when auditors come in, they're looking at a paper-based system, and the thought process was, well, those have been through nth number of reviews, right? Hence, the quality engineer can represent this, and there's no need to actually go in the tools. And there's actually like, it's discouraging to actually go in. It's been discouraged to actually go into the tools. But the tools are, adhering to the regulation themselves, right? And so the tools themselves, as long as they're validated for the intended use, can be used as a source of truth and help defend, anything that's done during the audit. It doesn't have to be completely like paper-based evidence, right? And I think that's what's happening. You still have to submit some set of documents to the FDA when you do your submission, and it is on paper, right? But a lot of the work that you're doing is kind of self-auditing through the proper use of the tools. And so that's the shift we'd like to see, and that's the challenge that the engineering and quality teams are having.
Excellent. Okay, Shauna, thank you very much for that. I'm going to hand it over now back to Marie, who's going to be wrapping up for us.
Yes, thank you very much. Indeed, it's time to wrap up for us. So thank you, Mercedes, Shauna, and Steven, for this great discussion. We hope that the content provided has been helpful for our audience. Thank you also for your attention, for your participation in the Q&A. If we didn't get to your question, we'll be sure to follow up quickly by email in the coming days. Please also share with us your feedback or additional questions in the survey that will pop up on your desktop at the end of the presentation. And as a reminder, this webinar has been recorded and will be sent via the email you registered with, so you can watch it on demand and share it with your colleagues. Thank you very much, and take care.